So I randomly stumbled across this anime on Crunchyroll because it was basically free and very accessible. It was in HD and all that. So I thought I'd go and check it out. So I do know that I've watched 2 high school romance comedies in a row, and I will have a bit more variety. And this definitely isn't an indicator that I have no social life at all. But yeah, it was very free and accessible. And do you know what? For an anime that I randomly stumbled across, I thought it was pretty cool. So here is my review of ReLife. I hope you enjoy. So what is ReLife about? Well, ReLife is about a 27-year-old NEET called Arata Kaizaki, who basically is someone who doesn't contribute to society. He's left his job after 3 months. Had this sort of like big corporate job. His parents pay his bills. He's pretty much useless. He just sits around in his 1-bedroom flat drinking beer all day, which is something that might be frighteningly relatable to some of the audience. It isn't necessarily relatable to me, but I did think, yeah, maybe that could be me in 10 years. I might need a ReLife as well. And he gets approached randomly by a stranger called Rio, who's from the ReLife Corporation, and he basically offers this guy a pill to go back 10 years in terms of appearance. So he will appear as a 17-year-old and he'll go back to high school for 1 year and basically experience the final year of high school again for just 1 year. This sounds very similar, to me anyway, it sounds very similar to the film 17 Again. I think it was a Zac Efron film, which I watched quite a long time ago. And it's sort of a similar premise. This guy who's basically not going anywhere in life becomes younger through this pill. So it's a fairly similar concept. Yeah, well, the first thing that sort of came to mind when I heard about this, I did think, well, wait a minute, a 27-year-old man going back to high school where there's going to be high school girls under the age of 18 was a little bit concerning, but don't worry, there's no need to call the FBI or anything. Those issues, those moral and legal complications are they are addressed in the anime, and it certainly isn't creepy. So I was very glad to sort of discover that. So what did I think? Well, do you know what? I actually, first of all, want to say that this was a strange series in the sense that it was only 13 episodes long. The main series was only 13 episodes long. And the main 13 episodes I thought were quite good, but there was certainly a lot left unanswered, and I think it could have been a lot better. And then they added 4 extra episodes, 4 OVAs. And my main piece of advice for watching this anime is you have got to watch the OVAs. They were made, I think, about 2 years after the main series, and I think it's crazy that they weren't ever part of the first series. I don't know what was really going on, but basically, you really, really do need to watch them. I won't go into too much detail about spoilers now. There'll be a spoiler warning in a minute, but it's so crucial that you watch those 4 OVAs, because I think it went from a pretty good series to a really quite good series thanks to those 4 OVAs. They really did not only save, they actually really made the series. One of my first impressions, well, actually, I thought it was quite funny at the beginning. I definitely liked the humour of it. The whole fact that Arata Kaizaki was going back to high school, he was completely out of touch with high school life, and he was also keeps failing his makeups and all that, and he's just pretty useless overall. He's quite a funny character. And I also thought his friend Chizuru was quite a funny character as well. She's basically someone who is completely socially inept. She has no sort of emotive intelligence at all. She speaks almost in like a robotic fashion, and the fact that she is so out of touch with any social interactions at all makes her quite a funny character indeed. So I did quite like Chizuru as well. And I think the script writing was quite good. There was certainly some funny scenes, some really good dialogue back and forth with the characters as well. So some very cool dynamics there, and that worked well, particularly in the early episodes. I did like that. Now, something that was a bit of a downside to the anime was the sort of middle section. I feel like the anime went into a bit of a lull in the sort of middle stages of the first 13 episodes. And it wasn't a hugely terrible situation. I'm not going to go into any specific spoilers, but basically the focus shifted from what I thought was quite interesting, which was Arata, his experience in high school going back 10 years, also with a little bit of focus on Chizuru and her just being completely socially inept. The focus shifted from that, which I was really enjoying and had a bit of depth to it, to randomly shifting towards Reina and her basically fairly petty high school squabbles with various characters, including Honoka. Now, I didn't particularly dislike Reina. I thought Honoka wasn't the most interesting character ever, but I just felt like it was fairly generic, sort of just squabbling between high school students and friendships and whatever. I feel like they could have spent that time maybe delving more into the ethics of going back 10 years in time, the ethics of the ReLife experiment where you send someone back 10 years, or they could have dealt delved into what it's like being at high school more, the friendships that Arata and Chizuru were trying to make. Instead, they spent too long, I think, focusing on Rain, and I was forgetting actually that Arata was meant to be the main character. Sometimes you barely see him in the whole episode, and I felt like that was a little bit disappointing. I felt like there was a little bit of a lull. It wasn't terrible, it was, it was fine, and it was still entertaining, but I felt there could have been a lot more depth to the middle, and I felt like they missed an opportunity maybe. And I suppose this sort of leads on to the end. I'm, again, not going to reveal any spoilers quite yet, but like I said at the beginning, the OVAs really do save the day. I felt the most interesting part of the anime for sure was the last third, including the OVAs. Definitely made the anime. It went from sort of petty high school squabbling to actually some quite deep things. Exploring Arata's life before the whole ReLife experiment. Again, not going to go into spoilers, but what his job was like before and the situations he dealt with then. That was very, very deep and kind of unexpected, and that I thought was very, very interesting indeed. And then the whole situation with the various romances at the end, which I won't delve into yet. So definitely would recommend the OVAs. What I would say about this series is it starts off pretty positively. There's a good amount of humour. It's quite fun and all that. I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I'm getting into this. And then I felt like it did dip very slightly, where it tends to focus more on Reina and sort of generic high school drama that wasn't particularly interesting and original, and then at the end it really does pick itself up. I think this is really the point where I've talked about all I can without mentioning any spoilers. So yeah, basically if you haven't seen ReLife, first of all I would say that it is worth seeing. I enjoyed it. I thought, as I was watching, I thought, oh, yeah, this is pretty good. Now it's actually finished and I've seen all the extra episodes. I thought, yeah, you know what? I'm definitely very glad I saw it. Because I basically randomly, as I said at the beginning, I wasn't even joking. I did just randomly stumble across it and thought, this looks pretty decent. I'll give it a try. And I'm glad I did, because I think there was a lot of interesting relationships. Definitely an interesting series. I thought it was a pretty cool premise as well. And some good script writing and all that. So, if you haven't seen ReLife, just stop watching now. And yeah, there's going to be some spoilers. See you in a bit. Alright, so we're back, and here's something that sort of might, I don't know, maybe surprise people, but I actually thought an interesting character who was basically a background character that didn't get explored at all was Aki. I think that's what his name was, Aki. He was basically the guy who had one eye covered with hair. He was very, very grumpy. He basically didn't smile the whole time, and he basically just looked a bit depressed and just in a foul mood the whole time. But what's interesting about Aki, and what was more interesting about him than, let's say, Honoka or Reina, was that he had sort of a more than just one dimension to him. He was actually quite protective of his childhood friend Honoka, which I thought was quite cool. And you actually see a much softer side, particularly during the whole volleyball, incidents with Honoka and Reina. I thought the most interesting bit of that middle section was actually Aki, because he showed a much softer side than what we saw of him. The first time we saw him, I think it was during the bit at the beginning where they're running around the gym track or whatever, and he seemed quite sort of mean, and I thought he was going to be a bit of a bully. But actually, I thought, you know what, I want to know more about this guy. He seems quite interesting. Maybe there's a reason why he's always in a foul mood. But unfortunately, I feel like ReLife missed an opportunity to really delve into what could have been a more interesting character as opposed to Reina and Honoka. So, that's personally what I thought. The last 6 episodes, 6 or 7 episodes, I would say were the best of the series. Once the whole thing with Chizuru and Arata started kicking off, I thought that was when it got really interesting, because it's not just any normal high school romance, it's the fact that each of them both think that the other is going to forget about them. Chizuru isn't sure that Arata is or isn't a ReLife experiment person. Arata has no flipping idea, because of course he doesn't. And that was a very interesting concept, the concept that they both were basically in love with each other, and normally their characters just deny their love for stupid reasons. Maybe it's pride or the fact they don't want to get hurt, but in this instance it was because really it was meaningless if they fell in love, because they'd forget it the next year. So that was a really interesting concept. One of my favourite scenes definitely was a couple of episodes towards the end where they're both hugging each other. It's basically the first time they've properly hugged each other, because Chizuru asked Arata before and he basically denied her. And it's the first time they properly hug, and they're both saying they're not going to forget each other, but they both know that they are going to forget each other, not knowing that it's even more complicated, because actually they're going to forget themselves, because they're both part of the ReLife experiment. And I thought that was it was quite emotional really, and very, very interesting topic to sort of cover, and that was quite an emotional scene. And actually, talking about emotional, I thought the ending was surprisingly emotional as well. When they meet in the post-credits scene, at the bar, and they realise and their memories come back to each other. That was a really nice ending. I thought that was sort of the correct ending. I thought maybe they would leave it as if they forgot each other, and that could have been quite a cool ending as well, but that would have been quite sad. So, from a sort of wholesome, happy perspective, yeah, I'm glad they did remember each other at the end. I think that was sort of played fairly well. And actually, also, I think another very emotional scene, which sort of pertains to this whole forgetting the relationship between Chizuru and Arata, was the bit where On discovers that Chizuru has written on her hand that she is in love with Arata Kaizaki, and she has to wipe it off, and she's in tears because she doesn't want them to forget, but that's part of her job. And that again was another really fascinating dynamic, that not only are there sort of moral implications for the people involved in the real life, the actual subjects of the experiment, but actually for the handlers as well. And I think that On particularly struggled with the whole fact that they're going to forget the people that were part of the experiment, and they're going to forget aspects of potentially their loves and whatever. So yeah, that was really cool. Definitely was saved by those last 6 episodes. I'm not saying it would have been a terrible series, but I think it would have been not a particularly deep or meaningful series. But I feel like there was so much depth and not necessarily complexity, but there was so much depth to the ending sort of section that it sort of definitely did redeem the anime. And again, the whole thing with the reason why Arata is basically a NEET and he's basically a useless, seemingly useless human being at the beginning of the series is because actually it's not because he's necessarily lazy or whatever, but he had a terrible experience with work and the woman that committed suicide and all that. And again, once that twist happened, I thought that was very clever as well, because you just assume he's some sort of generic, useless, lazy person, but actually there's a lot more to him than that. And actually he wasn't like that. He was made like that because of the events that happened in the anime, or before the anime technically. So that's pretty much all I've got to say about ReLife, I think. But I did very much enjoy it, actually. I randomly stumbled across it. I thought it was going to be pretty decent as I was watching it, and at the end I thought, you know what, I'm very glad I watched this. And that's basically what I have to say. So yeah, I'm going to be back with more reviews. I'm watching more anime, not just high school romance. There is more variety, hopefully, to the channel than just that. But I'll be back with more videos very, very soon. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you around.